Secure people, especially in dating, will not have a problem saying what they're looking for, especially in what their intention is with dating. Whereas a DA, they won't for sure know exactly what they want, and they might entertain situations that have no intention behind them. So you might hear language like, oh, I'm just looking to go with the flow.
When you were a DA, when you would say, let's just go with the flow or something like that, what's actually going on in your inner world? Will you explain so people are like, oh, now I get it?
Yeah, I think it's just...
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast. I am here with our fantastic co-host, Mike DiZio, today, and we're going to talk about a really important discussion, which is how to know if somebody is DA or secure. Now, here's why this discussion really matters. It's quite frequent that dismissive avoidants in the early stage of dating, before they've really attached, they can mirror patterns and attributes of a secure attachment style if you don't really know the nuances. And as many of you know who've been listening to our podcast for quite some time, we tend to not really show our attachment style fully until we've truly attached. That's where then we feel the most vulnerable. A lot of these patterns show up. But there are specific enough things to look for early on that may indicate, hey, maybe this person's going to be fearful avoidant in a few weeks. We are going to break down the really specific difference between secure in dating and dismissive avoidance, those early red or green flags to look out for. And if you didn't already know this, my attachment style was fearful avoidant and did the work to become secure, and Mike was dismissive avoidant. So we often share, a lot of our personal insights and shares, if that's helpful for you on your journey, about what it's like to kind of be on the inside of both perspectives. With that, I'll kind of kick it over to you, Mike, if you want to share the first major difference.
Yeah, for sure. We'll start off with, if you're dating someone who is DA, they're going to be a little more logical in the way that they talk. They kind of have a limited vocabulary for emotions. It won't be a lot of feelings-based talk. It's more going to be like what they think about things. So a lot of opinions, a lot of describing it very matter-of-factly, but you won't have that deep emotional language. Whereas secure people will share feelings, and you'll hear them mentioning feelings. Hey, the first time I did this, I felt amazing. I had such a rush of energy in my body when I, completed my first marathon. You'll just hear a lot more things of feelings, basically, and not so much thoughts.
Yeah. And to your point, I've actually noticed sometimes when I have DA friends or loved ones, you can ask them oh, what did you feel when this happened? And they'll be like, I thought this. And they actually won't even realize that they're not answering feeling-based questions. Oh, how did you feel when you had that conversation with your boss? And your boss, and you might be like, well, I thought about, the relationship with my boss, and I reflected, and it's wait, I asked what you felt and what you experienced, and a lot of that feeling dynamics, it's not really showing up in conversation much at all, or it's being deflected. And it's not the person's sure, somebody can intentionally deflect because they actively oh, I don't want to talk about feelings. But a lot of the time it's not even conscious to the dismissive avoidant themselves that they're doing that. And then, one thing I also wanted to add is I always look at relationships as having these different pillars. So there's sort of our mental pillar of connection, which is our philosophies, our opinions, our ideas, a lot of things that you just mentioned, even people's political views, all that kind of stuff, what they learn about, their hobbies, their interests. Then there's the emotional pillar, which is sharing our inner feelings or inner world with each other, vulnerability. Then there's physical pillar, which is our physical space, proximity can be physical touch. And then there's a sexual pillar, which is the obvious, sex and intimacy. A lot of times, dismissive avoidants will spend a lot of time and have a lot of people in their life that are purely connecting around that mental pillar. And sometimes you'll, see, for example, that dismissive avoidants go out and they share from they communicate from the mental intellectual pillar, their opinions, their ideas. With their friends when they catch up. They may have friends where a lot of the conversations are centered mostly around those things. But even on first dates, you might see that there's this constant kind of pulling of the conversation towards opinions, ideas, philosophies, rather than things that are vulnerable, dating history and past experiences and what you're looking for. There may be a trending away from that. So those are some really early little nuances in that topic.
Exactly. And one of the main reasons happens too is because at such a young age, you learn to sort of push those emotions down, and they didn't feel safe when you emoted, and your parents didn't sort of give you the love and soothing that you needed. So you kind of deemed emotions as unsafe and kind of useless. So you just stuff them down. So then I remember my range of emotions to pull from was so limited. So then when somebody did put me on the spot, you're like, oh, how did you feel when this happened? Oh, I felt good. Well, how did you feel when that happened? Oh, I felt bad. It was literally like, you either feel good or you feel bad, and there's not much in between. And it wasn't until I did the healing work, and even like, what's it called? That emotional scale.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's called. It's like the emotional scale or something. Yeah.
Demonstrates a scale of sort of like the lower.
The hertz, the actual, it's measured in hertz of like yeah.
And it's such a helpful tool. And I would recommend anybody check that out, where you can kind of like check in with yourself during the day and be like, hey, where am I on the scale right now? Oh, I'm on like kind of like boredom right now. Like I don't feel super great, but I don't feel like sad or fear or anything like that. But there's like a scale of like 30 different emotions, and sort of has them listed in chronological order, from like low emotions to really high emotions of like joy and like love and stuff like that. So like, yeah, I just remember before being like just very limited, and like even if I tried to explain feelings, it was just so limited. It was like black or white, or like good or bad. So yeah, this scale it really helps. It really shows you, okay, when I'm feeling this way, like pessimism, this is how it feels in my body. When I'm feeling joy, this is how joy feels in my body. And as I'm talking about it, sounds so like almost funny, like that you have to sort of make those connections, but you really do as a DA. Like you're so used to, like I said, like just suppressing and not feeling your emotions, that they're almost like foreign. And then you have to like reintroduce them and re-feel them.
And I think it's really easy, and I don't know if this is your experience, but I think it's really easy to kind of write it off, to be like, oh, I don't need to feel my emotions. Who cares? What value does that have? But like when you think about it from sort of this broader scale, it's kind of funny, because the reality is that your emotions, like you're born to do a few things. You're born and you eat and you sleep and you go to the bathroom and you emote, you feel. And we're born, like we've evolved to have this emotional feedback system, and emotions are always letting people know when something's out of alignment. And so, for example, and I know you know this, we talk about this stuff, but if somebody feels angry, I think dismissive ones tend to go like, oh no, I don't want to feel anger, let me forget. Whereas like, wait, if somebody's feeling angry, well, maybe it's because you need to set a boundary. Something's out of alignment. You need to set a boundary with your boss who made you angry. Or maybe you feel insecure. Maybe it's because you're beating yourself up and telling yourself, oh, nobody's going to love you or like you or whatever it might be. So emotions are constantly giving this mirror into ourselves so we can course correct. And this also include, hey, I love this. This lights me up. I should have a career doing this. And I've seen a lot of times dismissive avoidance, I would say slightly more commonly than other attachment styles, simply end up in careers they don't even like. And I think one of those underlying pieces is because they end up in careers they don't like sometimes because they're out of connection to their emotions. And so they kind of do with like what they think they should, or follow what their parents' advice might be. Or that's not all DAs, but that's a common happening, because they're not like, emotions help you become in tune with yourself and help you like really realize what it is that you need.
Makes so much sense in the career realm, because they always say like do something that lights you up, makes you feel passion, purpose, etc. But if you don't feel anything, you're like, oh, I got to try like 12 different things to see like, do I like what I'm doing right now? But you kind of waste a lot of time, because you're not going from your feelings, you're just going from logic. And like you said, you might be going from like what your parents think is best for you or what society thinks is best for you. But you waste so much time sort of going by those markers instead of going by your inner guidance system. So yeah, super important. Okay. So the next one. Secure people, especially when dating, will not have a problem saying what they're looking for, especially in like, what their intention is with dating. I'm looking for a long-term relationship. I'm looking for, someone to start a family with in the next few years. Like they'll you'll know where you stand when you're dating them, like what they're looking for, and their words definitely will match their actions and what they are. And if there's non-negotiables, they're happy to sort of respectfully walk away. Whereas a DA, they won't for sure know exactly what they want, and they might entertain situations that have no sort of intention behind them. So you might hear language like, oh, I'm just looking to go with the flow, or just, looking to connect and vibe with someone and see what happens. So it's a lot of like kind of not fully sure what they want, even though that, I guess that is in a sense saying sort of what you want, but it sort of leads the other person to think, oh, they're open to a various amount of outcomes, but really a lot of times they want to stay in that sort of go with the flow area for like a long, long time. And if you don't sort of get the intention from someone, then, you don't know where you stand. So
I love that. So let's unpack that, because that's a really important topic for listeners. When you were a DA, when you would say like times in your life where you've been like, okay, let's just go with the flow or something like that, what's actually going on in your inner world? Will you explain so people are like, oh, now I get it? Because is there a part of you that's like, oh, and I think this is important to unpack. Is there a part of you that's going, I'm actually not interested in anything serious at all, but I'm not going to say it? Or is it more like I'm just not really thinking that hard about it?
yeah, I think it's just there's low stakes. Like there's no chance of getting like your heartbroken or like left after like a long period of time, like maybe becoming attached to someone. So you're just like, I'm just going to dip my foot in the water and have fun and have like this companionship and person to hang out with, but you're not really thinking about it turning into like something long term. That could happen, but I think my thought at the time was I didn't want to feel trapped. So okay, that's for sure. Feeling trapped was like the number one thing for me. So I was like, if I use language that's, saying that I'm looking for a long-term serious commitment and I didn't do that, then, I would, look pretty bad and I'd get in trouble from the other person. So I would keep the language very like open of like, yeah, just looking to hang out with someone and see where it goes. Just looking to, for some good times with someone. So it was very like open language to not sort of trap myself or get myself in a situation earlier than I wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. And what would you give advice to people listening if they hear someone saying that, and maybe they're an anxious attachment style, or they're looking for something different in a relationship and they hear somebody saying that? What advice would you have for them? I have some advice.
I mean, if they're looking for a serious long-term committed relationship, if somebody's using that type of language, you should like respectfully head for the hills, because they're literally telling you, like, without telling you, like, I'm probably not going to be committing to anytime soon or maybe ever. Like, if you're using that sort of ambiguous language, again, it's not to say they'll never commit, but you might be wasting a lot of time because you won't know where you stand. You might feel like, I don't know where this is going. And you want to be intentional with your time. Your time is really important. So if you know that you want something, if you know you're going towards something, if that other person, it's not matching, you have to you gotta walk away. And even if there's like high intense physical attraction and stuff like that, you still you have to walk away. And that's one of the hardest things to do. I've always said that's one of the hardest things to do, is to walk away from a situation where you feel this like intense chemistry, which we know a lot of times it's like attachment style related. That's why this intense chemistry happens. But it's so hard to walk away when you feel that. But you literally, that's the work that you need to do for yourself. That's where you need to say, listen, I'm not going to make the same choices that I've always made and just gone for the person that I feel super high neurochemical cocktail towards. I'm going to, choose differently, and this is not what I want. So I'm going to have to, move on to the next person.
Yeah. And I think too, it doesn't mean you have to run or head for the hills immediately, but ask for the clarity. Hey, you say you're open to seeing how things go. I'm clear about where I stand and what I'm looking for. And I do know that I'm wanting something to evolve. It doesn't have to be in a rush, but I want something to evolve. And are you open to having a serious relationship if the connection's there? Is that something that you would be open to in the future? Don't be afraid to just ask somebody for clarity, for specifics, because so often I see people just not. And so they just don't do that, don't have the conversation. And it puts somebody on the spot a little bit, but it's going to help dig into if somebody's well, on further reflection, I'm actually really just not looking for that right now. Okay, now you've got a clear answer. And so don't be afraid to ask for clarity a little bit. And I'll be honest, when I was fearful avoidant, I would say things like, okay, I just want to see where things go. And that was pretty authentic for me. Because part of me was and it's interesting, it's not from a secure place, but part of me was wants connection, but part of me scared of it. So I leave it open because I'm scared of it. But I would also, if it was really a great connection, be open to it. So just ask, don't be afraid to poke if somebody's giving you that kind of information. To really see where they stand. So that helps you on the receiving end, then that more clearly going forward.
So that. And then obviously look for actions, not just words. So if you ask for clarification, the person's like, oh yeah, sure. Like, yeah, we'll have a connection for sure. We'll get into a serious relationship, at some point. But then you notice that like weeks have gone by, months have gone by, and then you ask to have a conversation of like, hey, like, where are we at right now? Which leads to my next point, which is secure people will be open to having sort of relationship check-in combos and be like, hey, like what's, we haven't really had to talk about this in a while. We've been dating for a while. Like what's going on here? Like, are we, official? Like, because I'm sure you've heard this so many times. A lot of people have been together for a long time and sometimes they don't even know where they stand exactly. And that must be the worst place to be in, where you're like with someone, you're thinking, okay, we must be like a couple. This seems very obvious. We're spending all this time together. But the other person's thinking like, no, like, I said it, wanted casual and I meant that.
Such extreme cases of this over the years. Like we're in relationships for like 15 years with somebody, like just like never defined the relationship. Like, and I think it's so important. It brings up this conversation of you have to set a deadline. Like and I love that you said that, like we have to vet people by their actions, not their words, because people can say all sorts of things under the sun. They can even consciously intend those things, but like, are they following through? And so I think it's really important to be able to say, okay, hold on. Let me have these conversations. If I don't see the needle move by what time, at what point do I betray myself? And so I think it's important to be able to say, okay, I'm going to say, like, let's say, for example, that you're dating somebody and it's like, 5 months, you're like, okay, there should be some sort of momentum by now. There's not. Okay, if by 6 months, we're not even in a place where we can really move in that direction and that's established, well, then I have to walk away. Because if I don't see something by 6 months, and generally securely attached people, they do get into relationships around commitment around the 3-month mark. Sometimes it's 4 months, sometimes it's 2 months, but they will tend to be there within that period of time. If you're seeing way outside of that or way after that, chances are that somebody's more dismissive.
Exactly. And yeah, just going on that point too, like, having the relationship check-in combos, you'll see that a secure is open to that, or they might be the one suggesting like, hey, let's have a little chat here to see how things are going. Like, are you happy? Is there anything can be improved that I can improve? Is there anything you think you can improve, we can improve, etc.? Whereas DA's relationship check-in combos, like suggesting that or bringing that up would probably have them be like, oh no, like avoiding it, like not really wanting to like say what they really feel or like, the direction of the way they see things going. Like you'll notice it'll be something that you'll probably get some resistance around, or maybe even like just shutting down and being like, no, like, can we do this later? And just trying to like push it back to a later date. And then hopefully, the partner forgetting about it. I know I used to do that for sure. And just swipe it under the rug and be like, oh yeah, it's not a good time right now. Like it was never a good time for me. It was always like, okay, next week, like, please just give me a little while to get my thoughts together. And the next week come along, I'm like, no, not right now. I'm not feeling it. So yeah, I think the big difference lies there. It's the secure's openness to talk about the relationship and all the facets around it, where the DA doesn't really want to talk about it in great detail.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, even at like a broader scale, securely attached people, they're comfortable talking about the relationship. So it's not even just like about check-ins. That's for sure one. And that's a great thing. And that's obviously like a huge green flag if anybody's like looking. But it's beyond that. They're comfortable being like, hey, what do you think about us? Where are we at in the relationship? They're comfortable being like, hey, what do you want for your future? Is this moving in the right direction? Or, hey, you know what? Felt really good about us until 2 weeks ago when this thing happened. And usually it won't even be 2 weeks ago because they'll address things more directly, but until yesterday when this thing happened or an hour ago. And so they're not afraid. It doesn't feel so vulnerable to them to just have direct conversations about the relationship as a whole. Whereas like, I know, having been fearful avoidant, if somebody wanted to talk about the relationship before we were even in a relationship, I'd be like, what? This is so serious. Or like dismissive avoidance, feel like that too. And so again, those are like green flags to look out for. Those are really good signs.
Yeah. It's so funny when you're saying those like little kind of innocuous questions, that would have sent me like really like, oh my God, like into a freeze state of like, oh my God, what are they asking right now? Like, this is so vulnerable. This is so like exposing, like how dare they put me on the spot? Like, Or you're just asking, like, we're hanging out all the time. Like, what's going on here? How do you feel about stuff? These should be sort of normal questions, and
Exactly.
should be able to answer them normally. But I shared with you before we talked on this podcast that I used to be so afraid of like saying the wrong thing. So it might be a little innocent question of like, hey, how do you see things going? Or how's the relationship? I'd worry if I shared something or like a doubt I was having or something that I was not feeling good about, that if I said the wrong thing, the other person would get like super mad or upset or have an emotional reaction to it. So I would probably just like, probably say what they want to hear. Just, oh yeah, things are great, things are good. But I might have some things in the back of my mind that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I feel safe enough to share these things. Where really it was my own sense of unsafety. It's not like the partner would have, hit me or screamed at me or told me I'm a horrible person. In fact, the opposite. They'd be like super happy that you're sharing some things that are going on, right? But yeah, that was one thing. I wonder if anybody else out there has that same.
I should add to that for anybody listening, because I think it's such an important point that we can almost do a whole podcast episode about. But when I was fearful avoidant, I would hold those grievances to myself because I would be like, oh, I can't say those things or share or whatever.
Yeah.
What I learned eventually is like, wait, by not sharing those, I keep building these like invisible walls between myself and someone else. It's the act of sharing it that is a huge cornerstone of developing into a secure relationship. It's the act of being able to say, hey, this thing is bothering me or upsetting me. A, because then you're not alone in carrying the weight of the relationship. Yeah. B, because there's always going to be little grievances. Like, I don't mean like you'll always feel like you're carrying them, but you're never going to go through like a 40-year marriage and never have like something you really disagree on or something that like you have to hash out or work through. And in fact, it's pretty healthy and normal to have something like that once a month or every couple months. Like, hey, I have an issue with the way this happened. Can we fix it this time and do it this way next time? It's not that having disagreements or differences of opinion is a negative thing. It can actually be a positive thing. It can create positive friction. It can be a balancing thing. It's how it's handled that makes it a positive or negative thing. So if it's handled by like holding it in and then getting angry later, or holding in, never saying anything at all, or criticizing all the time and nagging, then yeah, of course, those all became negative things. But the difference itself, the problem itself is not the problem. It's how we handle the problem that can become problematic.
100%. The beauty of sharing those kind of things is your partner gets to know where you stand on things, which again is such a gift, especially if like you're used to your partner not saying much. So when you get vulnerable and actually like go to your comfort zone to share something with them, to them that's such a gift. They're getting to know more of you and
absolutely
breeds connection. And on the other side is you've probably been holding on to this sort of lie for like who knows how long, and you're just afraid to let it out. Once you do actually let it out and you see that your partner appreciated you sharing it, like you get to unburden and feel better as well. Like you're not living like a lie. So it's win-win. It's like best case scenario to be sharing.
And I love that you use that word. Like, and in case anybody listening isn't clear, Mike doesn't mean like, oh, dismissive avoidants lie and hold their lies in and then come clean. That's not what he means. He means like, the moment we don't share our truth, there's an element of dishonesty there. The moment we don't share like what's really going on for us or what hurts our feelings or what makes us feel insecure or frustrated, there's this element of dishonesty. And then you accidentally, by doing nothing is still a decision, right? Doing nothing is still doing something in a way. So it's like by doing nothing, you're actually still creating this element of dishonesty. You're like building a relationship on dishonest terms just by not saying anything. And so now all of a sudden the cornerstones and foundation of the relationship are built on the wrong things. And of course there's going to be issues long term. So I like that you said that. I think it's a really important perspective. And I think that so often dismissive avoidants get sort of attached to the idea like, oh, I'm just not rocking the boat, or I just don't want there to be a problem, or I'm just protecting the other person's feelings, or I don't want to say the wrong thing and hurt anyone. And in reality, a lot of times it's like, well, actually you're kind of like living dishonestly in the relationship.
100%. Our next thing is your person will want to resolve conflict in a timely fashion. So they'll look for solutions and together try to come up with like the best outcome or the best course of action. Whereas a DA in conflict might sweep the issue under the rug and just sort of hope the problem sorts itself out. So they won't want to sort of meet it head on and will like do a lot of things in their power to avoid sort of conflict. Again, it's kind of trying to keep the peace, but by doing so, you're just like building up sort of more and more internal issues between you and your partner by not saying anything. So yeah, just those are two different things. Where a secure will want to resolve conflict like in real time or in a timely fashion, whereas a DA will not want to sort of go there and might just kind of hope it goes away.
100%. And because they're so good at compartmentalizing their feelings, they can kind of like handle that, whereas most other attachment styles can't. But it's always, I probably beat a dead horse when I say this, but like one of the biggest, like most life-changing things on my own healing journey ever was like learning to just get good at communicating. Like to me, that's probably been like the most important life skill I've ever developed. That maybe like learning to regulate my emotions. But it's because there's no resentment. You're not holding on to things all the time in relationships. I only knew when I was fearful avoidant how to have relationships with like resentment and unpredictability. And it's like, oh, the path out of that, if you're sick of that, is to learn to get good at communicating, to like put in the time and work, because then everything becomes solvable. And then like you feel like the person you're in a relationship with, you're happy, you're free. Like there's no like built up issues and it's good. And then you're like, whoa, that's what I was missing the whole time. So it's just, I just want to encourage anybody listening, like, get good at communicating, do the coursework, get the information, practice even when it's scary and vulnerable, normalize it in your life. Because when you do something enough, just like it might be scary to drive a car at first or fly on a plane, but you do it enough times, you're like, oh, we're good. You do that with communication, and that's going to be where it's like, oh, I'm free now. Like it's easy to solve problems. I don't have to harbor resentment. Communicating, it feels like a very light, easy thing. And that just comes with putting the work in, like with anything else in life. And also, if you haven't already, we actually have communication courses that will help you so much. You can check out for 14 days for free. We do a 14-day free trial once or twice a year. We're doing it for Valentine's Day month this year. And you can go through at least a couple courses in that 14-day period, download some workbooks, some materials, really get integrated into the content, and really learn how to communicate in healthy ways by taking those communication courses. So check it out fully for free if you want, with the link down below.
That's the only way to practice. And, to beat my own dead horse, I say we think it has to look perfect. And we probably see like TV shows and dramas and all that where people are arguing or whatever. And they seem to be communicating very well. Like their words are coming through well and et cetera, et cetera. But when I first started trying to open up with people, it was super awkward and like couldn't even, look at the person. But you have to say something. And then the more you do it, the more it becomes natural. And then, your body feels safer and safer. You don't go into like fight or flight while you're trying to communicate. And then you can actually have like clear thoughts and, you're not saying things you might regret and stuff like that. Like the calmer you can be and the more, in a state of like feeling safe around communication, the more you can sort of have, better communication and better conversations.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because I agree with it so much. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. Like it just has to be vulnerable. And if you're ever like, I don't know what to say or what the right thing is, just literally say what's on your heart. Like just say like, I'm afraid, or I am uncertain, or start a conversation by saying, hey, I'm really scared to have this conversation. I'm scared it's not going to go well. I'm scared it's going to push us apart. I'm nervous I'll say the wrong thing. Like when you just say what you're experiencing and say it really literally, it's almost always the antidote towards like taking steps towards resolution.
And if you need to, like, write stuff on a notepad or your cell phone notepad. Just say, hey, listen, like, this is really hard for me to say, and I'm really nervous about this. If you don't mind, I'm just going to have a few, like, notes here that are just going to kind of keep me on track. Because, like, I don't know about you, or maybe people listening, like, sometimes when I would go to talk about something vulnerable, oh, man, my head would just go blank. Like, I'd forget so many things that I was supposed to say. And then maybe after I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I left that out. Like that was the most important thing I wanted to share. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. I'm a big fan of like aids. Like you could have like a notepad or scribbles or
100%.
whatever it takes. Because like I said, your partner's going to be so appreciative. Like they don't care if it's not delivered perfectly. Like they're just going to appreciate you so much that you're actually stepping up and you care about them enough to be vulnerable and open up to them.
So. I agree with that so much. And just one last thing, and then we'll go to the next point, which is I think as well that when people are communicating, sometimes we think like, oh, like what if somebody has a bad reaction? You will every so often come across people who, even though you're doing your best, they don't have a good reaction. And that's part of your vetting process for who belongs really close to you in your life. Like if you communicate and somebody's like, I don't care about your feelings and they don't empathize and they're rude. And let's say you're like, okay, let me try doing it differently. Let me practice again with them and try again. And that's the same response you get. Okay, take a step back from that person. That person may not be like a really close person to you in your life, but what do you want to design in the relationship area of your life? Like if you're intentional and you're going to put the work in to create the life and live a life that you want, what do you want? Do you want a whole bunch of people around you where you're like, I'm just not going to bother communicating because it doesn't go well. I'm just going to settle. No, build a life where like you bring people closer to you and grow the relationships and nourish and invest in relationships where people do well with vulnerability, talk to you back in a vulnerable way, sort things out with you, rather than, oh no, I'm not going to bother because I'm scared it's not going to go well or the person's going to have a bad reaction. No, communicate despite how it may or may not go so that you get answers. You get to see who belongs really close to you, who you want to take a step back from. Like that's all a way of gathering information so that you can then proceed to vet and then build relationships that are worth investing your time in.
Exactly. Super helpful to do that. So the next one will be secures. If you criticize them, they'll usually take that as feedback. But actually more so, let's say, in dating where like secures can kind of laugh at themselves. If you sort of do like good natured ribbing or like, make fun of them a little bit, just jokingly, how they'll do that sometimes. Whereas a DA might take like criticism or like good natured ribbing the wrong way. So you might notice they get like really quiet if you say something like, a joke. Like, I'm trying to think of a joke that would like maybe send a DA.
Wait, can I tell a story? I have like a love language around being made fun of. I don't know why. Since I was a little kid, when people like make fun of me, I die laughing. It started. I have this very vivid memory of being in third grade, and I was a very sensitive kid. I would cry all the time as a kid. We were sitting in these like desks, and it was like me and these two guys, and they were mean to me all the time. And we were in like art class, and we had to paint this little painting of like Van Gogh's ear. Or no, sorry, that Van Gogh's ear is the story. Van Gogh's like Starry Night. And I remember I was painting it, and these two guys started going, oh, your picture is stupid. That looks bad, da da da. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm gonna cry. And all of a sudden I just burst out laughing. It was this very like almost in real time like thing. And then the more they would make fun of me, the more I would just start laughing. Like it was like actually, for whatever reason, and I remember like thinking like, why am I laughing? But I couldn't stop laughing. And then ever since then, like I don't know what happened. Something in me like just always laughs when people make fun of me. And so that's like I played soccer in university and went off, and that's like, and I remember having this roommate who was my really good friend. And I would poke fun at her. Like, I thought it was like a funny thing and it was sweet. And it was never like mean stuff, but it would be like, oh, like just silly things. And I remember one day she came to me and she was like, hey, that actually really bothers me. And I remember being so shocked because I was like, wait, I've been doing this for like 2 years. I felt like all these things and be like so badly and realizing like, wait, that's not everybody's experience. And each you as a DA. And to your point, like, that's a good thing to look out for and be on the lookout for and sensitive to, A, because it's not a good thing to do in relationships if it hurts other people. And B, because it's a good way of seeing like it tends to be very specific to DAs. APs might be kind of like touch and go on that. I find most fearful avoidants have a good laugh if they're being made fun at. I actually can't think of a fearful avoidant. I'm sure there will be, but I can't think of a fearful avoidant off the top of my head that isn't like that. And then secure people are usually pretty like, happy-go-lucky with that stuff too. So it's a really niche thing, but a really interesting way of defining and figuring it out.
Yeah, I remember just getting like kind of butthurt when people would make little jokes, even like friends and stuff. But that was their way of like bonding, and like it was, they didn't really mean it. But if you have a wound around feeling defective, you feel like somebody's having a go at your personality, like you at your core, instead of like, if you fell down, like, everybody's laughing or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, I'm such a screw up, I'm such a dumb person, and you just want to like disappear and hide, but really everybody lies. Somebody trips and falls and like it doesn't hurt themselves. Like people laugh and it's no big deal. Like you're not trying to like, give the person
yeah. Or sometimes it takes the pressure off. Like, I don't know, I would always feel have you ever had this experience where you like do something embarrassing in public, like fall, and then like you look around like nobody noticed, and then it's just even weirder. But if somebody notices and laughs, it's like, oh, you can like, it's like relief. It normalizes it. I don't know.
Isn't it funny though? The first thing we do is to like look to see if anybody saw us fall, trip or whatever.
The start of a new year always feels like a fresh start, a chance to set goals, get organized, and focus on what really matters. And for a lot of you, financial wellness is at the very top of that list. But let's be honest, keeping track of every single subscription, bill, and expense can feel really overwhelming at times, especially when life is fast-paced. And that's where Rocket Money can be such a game changer. Everything is finally in one place, and you can save money without the stress. Rocket Money is a personal finance app designed to support you every step of the way. It helps you find and cancel any unwanted subscriptions, keep an eye on spending, and even works to lower your bills so that you can feel more confident about your financial future. With Rocket Money, everything is easy and clear to understand. You'll see all of your subscriptions in one place so you know exactly where your money is going. And if there's something you no longer need, Rocket Money makes canceling it very quick and hassle-free. Their dashboard also gives you a crystal clear view of your expenses across every single account that you have. You can set a personalized budget, track your spending habits, and get alerts if something needs your attention, like an unexpected charge, or even if you're nearing your budget limit. And the best part is that Rocket Money will even step in and negotiate lower bills on your behalf. No endless hold music, no frustrating phone calls. It's actually all handled for you. With over 5 million users and over 500 million saved and canceled subscriptions, Rocket Money isn't just an app. It's a partner on your financial journey. Members save an average of $740 a year using Rocket Money's premium features. So if you want to take a step towards financial clarity and peace of mind today with Rocket Money, you can head to rocketmoney.com/Thais. rocketmoney.com/THAIS.
A DA might be seen as like selfish. So like they have high consideration, self-consideration, because a lot of times, at a young age, I decided I have to do everything for myself. Like it's kind of me against the world type thing. So you'll see that they might, have some behaviors or do things that seem like inconsiderate. Like they might go to Starbucks and then come to your house and they didn't bring you on, or, didn't bring you flowers on Valentine's Day or something like that. It'll be stuff that you think like, geez, like this is not considerate, but really it's just sort of more of an attachment thing where it's, they're a little more concerned about their own survival. So it's not like they're intentionally being like, oh, I'm not going to get you a coffee, or I'm not going to wait for you to start eating my food, or whatever it may be. It's just more so that they've been going through their whole life sort of thinking like, I need to make sure I'm okay. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem here. Whereas secure people have good self-consideration, but also have a lot of consideration for others. So you'll see a secure do things probably that are, they'll come home with their favorite drink or go out of their way to do something that they know, makes you happy. That sounds terrible. That you did not say DAs would never do anything out of their way to make their partner happy, but just generally you'll hear that, oh, my partner seems so selfish. Like they always do these things.
I would say almost like there's more of a theme of like other people doing that. Anxious attachment styles will be like thoughtful all the time, almost too much sometimes at the expense of themselves. Fearful avoidants can kind of be like that too. Securely attached people, there will be a theme in the relationship of like, okay, I go out of my way, or I check in, or I think of you. Whereas dismissive avoidance, it's less of a theme. And there can be a little bit of times where there's like a space or like absence of that compared to other attachment styles. And so it's not like, to your point, I think it's important to recognize it's like they don't. It's just like it's not like a part of their personality or a theme. But, it doesn't mean like, okay, if you're in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant, good luck on the romantic side of things. They're never going to really do thoughtful things. No, it means that should be a conversation. That should be something you bet for. And people who are worth like sustaining and growing a relationship with, they may not be perfect, but they'll put in that effort. You'll see the needle move. You'll see that effort, and you'll see that as they become more secure, that there's a lot of growth in those areas. So it doesn't mean it's all or nothing, just for anybody listening, right? But it's something that you can communicate for and then see the type of response you get.
Yeah, exactly. Our next one is handling adversity. So like in moments of like crisis, they say you can really see someone's personality when like something really big happens or like an emergency comes up. So we'll start with secure. Secure is generally like if something's not good is going on in their life, they won't like try to distract themselves with other things and not sort of go into solution mode. They won't isolate. They'll sort of let you know as a partner, like let's say they're going through something, they'll let their partner know that they're going through something, and even ask like if there's something you can do to support them. Like, hey, like, listen, I'm going through this really tough time. Is there any way you could, I don't know, come over tonight and just spend some time with me? Just, I would really appreciate that. Whereas a DA might appear like they're handling a situation or a crisis or adversity well. Like a lot of DAs can come across like cool, calm, and collected, but usually on the inside, they're in like panic mode, and they might not share it with you and will probably never ask you for like support. They will probably more so like distract withdraw, isolate, and distract. And, you know, sometimes the partner is left like not really knowing what's going on. They might know that obviously their partner is going through something, but they won't know exactly what, they won't know the severity of it. And definitely like they want to help. Like it's probably your partner's natural reaction to want to be like, hey, what can I do to help? What can I do to help you get out of this? But a DA will generally not ask for support. They're going to be independent and self-soothe and sort of want to get through this themselves. So.
And I think it raises like a couple of important things that you said. So one is that there's this difference between self-soothing and self-numbing. Like a lot of DAs will like self-soothe and like they get the reputation as being great self-soothers, but they're kind of like, they're not really regulating themselves. They're like, oh, I feel frustrated. Let me go course correct. Let me have the conversation with my boss so I feel less frustrated. Or let me figure out what the root problem is and have that, you know, discussion and figure things out. They're more like, or maybe they're like, oh, I don't have good enough boundaries. Let me have better boundaries. They're not like looking at the problem and working through it, which I would constitute more as like soothing or even regulating, like doing things that are like, you know, sitting on the couch and being with their feelings and noticing what's going on. Like it's a lot of avoidance, like numbing out, like distracting, getting busy, you know, these kinds of things. Securely attached people are very good at self-soothing and soothing with and through others, co-regulating. So they can regulate on their own. They know, okay, I have to go for a walk and process my thoughts, or I have to like, you know, do a meditation and be with myself. Like they have good, well-developed self-regulating mechanisms that are healthy and constructive. And they're good at regulating with and through others. And that's also well-developed. Whereas dismissive avoidants, they numb more than soothe. Anxious attachment styles are good at soothing through others, but not at all on their own. And fearful avoidants honestly struggle with both. Those are good ways to just notice the different sort of attachment dynamics in there for sure.
100%. This next one, I think this is like the most obvious one. Like if you're just unsure, like this is just for me as clear as day. A secure person will introduce you to their family and friends after dating a while. The logic there is like, you know, they're excited, they're happy about this blossoming relationship. They want to share, you know, with their loved ones what's going on in their life, who they're spending their time with. Like, so it's like a joy. It's like a good motivation to want to introduce them to their friends and family. And you might even see them like posting a pic on social media and stuff like that, or changing their relationship status for all the Facebook boomers out there. But a DA they will put this off until the cows come home. They will not really try to quickly introduce you to their friends group. They won't introduce you to their parents. To be honest, a lot of times, and I did this before, my parents didn't even know I was like with someone for like a year. Like I wouldn't tell them that I had like a partner, like I was dating someone. So yeah, that's one of the biggest ones. And then social media for sure. Like I would never before put like anybody on social media. It was just too like, whoa, that's sending way too much of a message.
Okay, can you unpack that for listeners? Because that's something that for sure so many people are like, why aren't they like this? So can you unpack from the inside world? You know, is there a defective core wound, feeling like you're going to be judged by your partner, like by who your partner is in the eyes of your friends or family? Like tell us why the family thing is so difficult at the time, and then why the Facebook stuff or social media stuff is so hard.
So like if you were just one-on-one with someone, you have this relationship, it ends after 2 years, you know, you break up and then that's it. But if you were to involve like their friends, their relatives, their, you know, social contacts, you probably ought to know some of their friends and quite like them. Their friends' boyfriends, maybe I became buddy with them. There's just so much like co-mingling. I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah.
But you're just like, oh my God, like already you don't want this like deep, big emotional show if there is a breakup. But then now, if there's all these people involved and like families are upset and all this kind of stuff, it's just way, way too much. So for me, I'm like, unless it's the person I know that I'm gonna like marry and like be with for like a long, long time, I'm not gonna sort of incorporate all these different things.
And it's a form of self-protection at the end of the day. It's a form of protecting from feeling judged or criticized or shamed or extra hurt or people asking questions or invaded. Like it's at its root, it's all of these fears. And it's like, let me just avoid having to deal with these fears by avoiding putting myself in a position where they could come true.
Totally, 100%. And it's super hurtful. Like for sure, the other person's like, "Are you ashamed of me? Like, why are you hiding me from everyone?" But again, it's less to do with the person because you're with them, you're wanting to spend time with them, but you're just not wanting to include like everybody else in that. Not even in case, you probably think eventually the person's either gonna like, if it gets too close, they're gonna see who you really are and then leave you for someone better. That's the way that I thought. I also didn't want to be judged by like their family members. I would also put off trying to meet. They would want to introduce me to their friends and their families, and I would try my best to like not meet them as well. Again, I was worried that they might judge me as negatively or being, oh, this person's too quiet or too this or that, the other. So again, it's just, I didn't want to go out of my comfort zone, and I just felt comfortable with me and that person. That person accepted me for who I am. And, I didn't want to risk meeting other people that might give my partner, oh, why are you with that person? Like he seems weird, or just all these really weird insecurities.
Typical, you were conditioned as a child. That's what happens to everybody. And then even if those things are unfounded, just like, I always give this analogy, like if you go into the woods and you see a bear and then you run from the bear, but the next day you have to go back into the woods, you remember the bear and like what it looked like. You don't remember like, oh, okay, the pretty flowers next to the bear yesterday. So we hold on to negative things from our conditioning. We really replay them and then we think that they're everywhere. And so it's like if you go through life and there you are in a situation where that's your childhood conditioning, it may seem funny, for people listening, like, oh, like nobody's going to meet you and be so judgmental, or like you're great, like that you're going to be accepted by the family, no problem. But it's like, wait, if we weren't made to feel like that as a kid, like we're still seeing and operating through that lens. And so for people listening, if that's your partner or a loved one or a friend, like that may be really real from them in their reality. And it doesn't mean don't have needs and don't communicate your needs, but hopefully that just gives insight in terms of like what some of their inner reality or experience might be.
100%. Lastly on that topic, so I think it's such a big one for DAs. I think it caused a lot of problems in relationships with the DA not wanting to blend friends and family and all that kind of stuff. There's also the fear that like you're not sure yet about this person, or like going the distance with this person, but doing all these things, you're worried about you're sending your partner the message that like, oh man, this person wants to really like enmesh a lot, or like we must be going down the path of like marriage basically. So I think it was just too much of a
it's funny because like that's not everybody other attachment styles. They're like, oh, let's just bring people around. But DAs, it's like, okay, these are the steps towards it's like marriage, and it feels like there's this element of seriousness there.
Feels so serious, and like just to post a picture on social media, that would be like crazy. Like that would be such a message of like, oh my gosh, like Mike's getting married. Like this is nuts. Yeah. So the next one and last one, I guess, for the day will be if a secure person has a need that's kind of going unmet, they will sort of come forward and express it. And a DA will not. Like a DA will just, if a need's not getting met, first of all, they probably won't believe that you're responsible for any of their needs. So they're definitely not going to come and ask you for anything. And yeah, they'll just, if there was something that they needed or wanted, they probably won't come forward and ask you for it. And then they might even think like, oh, I'm not with the right person because they do X, Y, Z, and I don't like that. But really, they haven't spoken up or even, said anything about it. So that's not.
And they see unmet needs as like compatibility issues, whereas like compatibility issues is when there's differences and nobody's working to close the gap. Like differences are not bad in a relationship. They can be good and they can actually be really healthy and be grounding and balancing, right? Like one person has strengths here, the other person has strengths here, and together it makes a whole. Like that can actually be a benefit to being in a relationship. But if somebody's in a position where they think, okay, because we're not perfectly aligned here, okay, that's a compatibility issue, because they don't realize, no, it's actually a communication issue. We can just hash it out and work it through by talking about it. Then it also constantly causes the dismissive avoidant to keep thinking like there's an issue in the relationship with the person that they're with, rather than an issue in the communication with the person. And I think those are two really important differences to notice.
Going on with that comment, and it was another one that we did mention, but it's that a secure knows that they can make things work with someone else who's willing to make something work. So it doesn't have to be this perfect alignment of like, we believe all the same things, we're never going to fight, everything has to be the honeymoon stage for years and years. Whereas the DA thinks there's kind of one perfect person out there for them that's going to be like, going to have the same values, same beliefs, same likes, dislikes, and there's going to be no fighting, no conflict, nothing like that. So you're going to find that the difference in that, where it's like the secure knows that there's going to be issues are going to come up. You're going to have to speak up and communicate for some needs to be met. Whereas the DA will kind of internalize and be like, I don't think this is the right person because it seems like we're fighting, and if a couple really loved each other, they wouldn't fight. And then they might, eventually end the relationship because of that. So that's another big difference.
100%. That's a good one. So that is it for today. Let us know in the comments down below some of the big things that you've seen and noticed, because obviously we can't get to all of them, but those are a good bunch. Curious to hear your experiences, even for other attachment styles. We can definitely do some breakdowns of other attachment styles in the future. You can check out Mike's social media handles down below. And we also have a 14-day free trial running at the Personal Development School right now. So you can check it out there. Gives you a free trial to everything, every course, every webinar. And you can really get through a good bit of content, download some of the materials within that period of time. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, listening, stopping by, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See you next time.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth, and thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.